Hello and welcome to this week's Gaming the Podcast. I am John Robertson, joined by Stace Harmon. Together we are Indie by Design, and this week is our monthly look back at what we've been playing. This takes into account the games we've been playing in September. Of course, we're not going to go through everything that we've been playing. We're just going to pick up on one or two games that have stood out for us. And for me, it's kind of the game that everyone seems to be playing and talking about at the moment, for better or worse. So popular that you can't play it. Some people have struggled to play it. Which is New Worlds, the new MMO from Amazon, which I've been playing quite a bit of in the last days since it came out. Stace, you've not played it. Why haven't you played it?
I have not.
Not an MMO
I'm one of
fan?
those. Everybody's playing it apart from me. I'm not a huge MMO fan in general. I would say probably that I just haven't found the right one, or I haven't been exposed to the right MMO, I think is probably why. There's a logistical setup just purely through the way that I play games and where my PC is in the house and all the rest of it, which means it's not the most obvious thing for me to spend a lot of time doing. So yeah, it's broadly that really. It's just sort of it's been on my radar, but it's not a thing that I've sort of leapt to play. I know you played the beta a month or so ago now, was that?
Oh, longer than that now.
Was it longer ago? Time flies.
2 months, probably.
Okay. Wow, time does fly. So, and was that the first, so why did you, I guess let's start there. Why did you get into the beta? What was it? Are you one to just kind of sample whatever kind of MMOs are around, or was it a particular thing about that one that made you think this looks appealing?
I didn't really know a huge amount about it when I played that beta. I think yes, that it's a new MMO, and so that was enough, really. Like, it was a new big MMO, and there hasn't really been it's like the most exciting thing to happen in MMOs for a long time. Like, there hasn't been a big MMO for a long time, and the ones that are big, Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls, Warcraft, the ones that are big today, they've been around for ages. They've obviously, there's a reason why they've stood the test of time, because they've continued to add content, they've evolved, and they obviously they're doing things right.
And you've got form in this area, right? Because Final Fantasy 14 in particular, you played a lot of that,
so I've played all of those. I've played Elder Scrolls, Warcraft, and 14, but yeah, 14's the one of MMO I've played the most by a long way. I've lots. In
fact, you're so ingrained in it that you just have a shorthand for it. You just call it 14. So it's that.
Well,
one.
there are
it's
only
14.
Final Fantasy games, so you just have to say the number.
True.
Nothing else matters. So no, I mean simply for that reason, because there hasn't been one for so long, a big one for so long. It's just that curiosity was easily enough to make me play it. I mean, there is a kind of curiosity that it's Amazon as well. And I mean, Amazon have had games in the past, but this is their first sort of giant game. What does
that, because that, like, how does that not change things, but affect things? To my mind, it's like, okay, it means that the resources are behind it. That isn't necessarily a given, of course, because Amazon, just because they have all of the money in the world, it doesn't mean they're going to pump it all into an MMO, but it suggests that it could, if they want it to be around for a long time. I mean, you could say the same thing about Google, and that they chop and change products pretty swiftly. So it's not just like, oh, it's a huge company, therefore they're going to pump loads of money into it, because it doesn't always work like that. But yeah, how does that impact for you? Is there a sense of security in that sense? It's like, oh, this isn't going to go away tomorrow because it's Amazon.
Not really. I don't really know how it factors in, to be honest. I wasn't really expecting anything of the game because it was Amazon. I was kind of expecting it to have a certain level of polish and a certain degree of sort of triple A-ness, I suppose, because it's Amazon and because they do have those resources.
Did you expect it to download really quickly? Because
well, the service we can talk about.
Delivery.
But the it's reasonably, this isn't necessarily because it's Amazon, but it's very reasonably priced as well. Like, it's $40. I can't remember how much it was in the UK. It's like £35 or something. I can't remember. And there's no subscription fee. So it's very it's a very good way to get into an MMO if you are kind of put off by those other games.
Doesn't require that commitment financially on a longer term.
So,
it's not, you haven't got to worry about when am I going to play this? Am I going to get my money's worth? You just,
and you can just play it for like 10, 15 hours if you decide this isn't for me. It's like, well, it was $40. Like, it's fine. Doesn't matter. You're not locked in.
Cheaper than most standalone games. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, again, I don't know if that's nothing to do with it being Amazon, although I guess Amazon could afford to take the lack of subscription. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting game. I didn't jump in immediately at launch. I jumped in like 2-3 days later. So I missed the worst of the server issues. And it's kind of ironic, silly, really, that the game has server issues, given that Amazon Web Services is like one of, if not the biggest server provider in the world. And they can't even make the servers work here. There was talk one of the servers had a queue that reached over 20,000 people long waiting in this queue. I've not seen any queuing issues at all. I've queued for minutes, which is normal in an MMO. But
so there wasn't anything, or was there anything rather? I'll make it a question rather than a statement. Was there anything about it that did about like its kind of setting, or it's what it looked like, or how the combat system sounded like it worked before you jumped into it?
No.
Was there anything sort of that? Because I'm trying to think of the things that have attracted me to MMOs in the past. And the last big one that I remember actually being excited about pre-release was Guild Wars 2. So we're going back a long way. And for me at that point, honestly, it was the aesthetic. I really loved the aesthetic of the world, but not necessarily what it eventually ended up looking like. More the mood boards and the publicity art and that kind of stuff. And then obviously that it wasn't really represented in the game. But so was there anything on that front that kind of drew you in, or was it more of a curiosity to just
No, I
explore?
was gonna play it no matter what, because it's, just like I said, it's the next big MMO. I was in. I'm gonna play it no matter what.
So server issues aside, how's it been going? What have you enjoyed about it?
Well, there's so much in the game, like, and what's good is good, and what's bad is bad, like really bad. So it's an interesting game. I mean, if you like, I know all MMOs like this to an extent, but this one in particular, if you like numbers ticking up, it's like the best game ever made. Like, there's so many numbers. Like, not just your character level and your weapons and stuff, but the crafting in particular. There's so much crafting, like cooking and smelting, logging, mining, fishing. And then it's not only that, but so there's like your gathering of materials, like gathering the wood, gathering the rock, gathering the animal, the hides and whatever. But then there's also working those things, and they're completely separate not skill trees, like leveling up paths. So the amount of numbers is ridiculous. The crafting is one of the best things in the game, like if not the best thing in the game. It's just so deep. It's unbelievably deep. Like probably the deepest crafting system, certainly in an MMO, I've seen. A lot of people have compared it to RuneScape. I didn't play RuneScape, but a lot of people are saying that that's what it's influenced by or /copied. But yeah, it's just the vastness of there's so many elements. The combat, the regular missions, the town missions, the PvP is integrated into the game really well. There's not like separate servers. You just like flip between PvP whenever you want.
Yeah.
There's constantly events for PvP going on, or you can just go and just PvP battle people whenever, and that kind of is maybe the most fun I've had with PvP. I haven't done much PvP.
So for those of us that haven't played it, and also I guess for those of us like me who last played an MMO a very long time ago, and who remembers MMOs to be a particular way and another specific kind of structure and format, how does it differ? How does it what's sort of the new game experience like? Is it 20 hours of doing sort of solo quests and then the PvP and PvE co-op opens up, or how do they kind of
it's whatever you want. Like there is like a tutorial section at the start up to like level 5 or 6. Doesn't take very long. It's like 45 minutes maybe. Slower if you want it to be slower. So it doesn't really it does just kind of throw you in pretty quickly, and it's just like, okay, here's all this stuff now. There's absolutely loads of stuff, and you can just do whatever you want. Like you will have people that focus on only collecting stone. Like some people will do that, and like then they'll pass it to someone else to work the stone. And so within your guilds, within your company, you can have incredibly specialized roles, which might seem really boring, but actually I probably will gravitate towards one of those specialisms because I don't know, like it just makes you feel part of like a bigger thing. Like it sounds like work, and it kind of is, but like it just makes you it just makes you feel like a part of something bigger than yourselves. But in terms of what it doesn't really do anything new. It just crams in everything that like every MMO's has basically into one thing. And some of the when it's good, it's good. It's like the crafting and the combat's really good. The combat it's more like real time. So you're real time attacking, you're real time blocking. You've only got like a few abilities, but you can switch between two weapons on the fly. So you can have like your 3 special abilities. I use a Warhammer and a Great Axe, just 2 massive weapons. So I can flip between my 3 Warhammer special abilities into my 3 Great Axe special abilities and just like use those simultaneously.
Right. So this again is another, like the combat particularly, again, Guild Wars 2 as a reference, but just it's not beyond the realms of comprehension that generally MMOs can often be like, oh, you've got a hotbar and you've got 4, 5, 6, 8 abilities and they're all assigned to number keys. And you hit 1 and then you get this, muscle memory or, of 1 and then that takes 10 seconds to cool down and followed by 4, 5, 3, 2, and it becomes like I don't know. It always felt like a sort of a programming thing to me. Like you're just setting up a certain set of instructions and you're doing it over and over again. This sounds more, I guess, more dynamic or more...
No, you are still doing that. Like I still do the same. I've figured out the pattern of how to stun enemies, how to attack them, and then if things are getting dodgy, how to knock them all away from me. And I will follow that same pattern most of the time. It's just like the things like the dodging and the blocking when they're in real time, you're actually dodging attacks that are like flying at you through the air, which doesn't really tend to happen in other ones. You just get hit or not and you just roll the dice. But in here you are you have to stay more engaged in avoiding attacks as well as giving.
So it sounds like more of a two-way thing than just I'm setting up and I think that's what I meant about programming really, when I used to think of it in that way, that really you had to read a situation, but what you were doing, or it felt to me like what you were doing wasn't really going to change based on stimulate or kind of things coming back the other way. Whereas this is more, so you can't just close your eyes and go, I'm going to hit all these buttons in order and this is going to achieve this result. Like there's...
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like it's not Bayonetta. Like it's not Devil May Cry.
It's probably good.
Like it's still an MMO. It's still not basic, but it's still like the things do feel like predestined. It's not a third person action game, but it is kind of closer. It is kind of closer to that. Just in that, you just have to take care. You just have to like watch out for stuff more. But you still do have cooldowns. You're still going through the same motions most of the time. Certainly if you're going around solo. But anyway, the combat is pretty good. Like, but the stuff that's bad is like the missions. The main mission, like any of the missions. All of the missions, side missions, everything are just they're like the worst of the worst MMO. Are like not the worst. That some people like them, but they're just like the most cliched. It's like collect 10 of these, collect 5 of these, go here and talk to this person, go and scout this area, like just like collect this and then transform it into this and give it to this person. Like it's just so boring. And the actual story, like I've just given up on it. I just skip through it now. Just E. Like, give me your mission. Yeah. Accept. And just go and get the experience points.
Right. So narrative as a reward isn't a particularly strong.
No, but it's never been for me in MMOs. Really, it's never really been. Even Final Fantasy 14, which is probably the closest one to being decent. Still doesn't matter. It's just those numbers ticking up. It's unlocking the new stuff. It's interacting with other people. Like it's that, and this game does those things pretty well. But even the missions, even though they're dull, like in a way, it's kind of nice that they're dull because it doesn't get in the way of like the crafting or the PvP. Like they're just something you just like go through the motions. I think that's the nice thing about there being so much in the game is that you can choose the pace to play. It's entirely up to you. You can be super intense and be PvP all the time, and you've really got to be on it, and you've really got to be taking care to do the right thing and act intelligently and keep alert and learn as you go. Or you can just go and collect stuff and level up your crafting, or provide materials or store materials for working them later. Or you can just go and work all the materials that you've gained. Or you can just go and gently just go through the missions. And the missions, like the sort of the difficulty curve on them is pretty lenient. Like there's not too much grinding between missions. Like it's not like, okay, no, you just have to grind this area for an hour before you're at the right level to do the next. So you don't really have to do that. So yeah, I like that about it. Like if you're looking for something really intense in that hour, in that 5 hours, in that 10 hours that you're going to play, then you can. If you want to just sit back and just sort of let the game wash over you and just like be part of the world, engage in the chat a bit. If you're on Discord and you've got some people to play with, like just then you can. I
like that idea of kind of there being so many things to do. So because I can imagine myself doing that, like sampling different things and then just picking a couple of things or even just a thing to go really deep on and provide that. It reminds me a little bit of the way, I don't know if there's any building projects as such, but in the way that you talked about Valheim in the past, that there's you're part of something, basically. Like you have a job to do or a self-assigned job, or a job that you've assigned, amongst your group or your guild or your covenant or whatever it is. And then, and that's what you do. That's like, and people rely on you to do that. And you get, there's a sense of pride and satisfaction in contributing to a wider purpose. And I mean, eventually I'll find like my little niche. I'll find my little fishing. Fishing's always appealed to me. Can you fish?
Fishing, you can fish. Yeah, I have not fished. I have the ability. I have the ability to fish. I don't like fishing at all in games. It's boring.
I've never been fishing. I really like something that I watch. Gone Fishing, which is Bob Mortimer and Paul Whitehouse, which is kind of it shows you the pace that my life is at these days. And that just really appeals to me. I like the idea of going and being able to fish.
Yeah, no, fishing is way too boring for me. I much prefer just to go out of town and spend 50 minutes just knocking on boulders and collecting the stone. Much better. So I don't know what my little niche is yet, and I haven't really tried to find one. I'm going to just try to, I don't know, probably hit a level cap and then see what I feel like, to be honest, and kind of take it from there. That's kind of how I play most MMOs. Like I'll just try to just like streamline. Although in this it feels less streamlined because there's so many different things to do, so you're constantly being distracted. But normally what I'll do is I'll just like mainline it to the level cap, and then from there decide, okay, having played it for that long, this is what I've liked, this is what I don't like, and then I'll just sort of zone in on those.
Is it important to you where the level cap is? I hear this from some people. They talk about how the level cap in X game is only 60, or now it's been raised to 85 or whatever it is, and that it's talked about in a as a thing in and of itself, like as either a positive or a negative thing in and of itself. Does that
I've never.
Does it impact you in any way?
No, not really. I mean, I want it to be long enough that it feels rewarding. I don't want it to feel too long that that, given what I've just said, that I want to get to level cap in order to then be able to really choose how I want to play the game. So I don't want it to be so far out that I don't get to that point until, a year's time or whatever. I don't know. The levels, I haven't really noticed it yet, probably because I'm not at a high enough level yet to start having to, I'm still leveling up pretty quickly. Supposedly the leveling up has been elongated since the beta, so it's taken a bit longer, but people are already at level cap. Of course they are. Like, people would have turned it on and not stopped until they're at level cap. And then,
So then is there a sense of the game begins at the level cap? Is
for
that
a lot
like
of people, yeah. And
that's when you sort of
I know
settle into
people like that as well.
Right.
Like I certainly know people like that. I know Diablo 2 that we spoke about last week, one of the people you play with. Basically, he's of the, like, the game doesn't begin until the end game begins. Like, everything up until then is just learning and gathering.
training. Yeah.
And then, then once you're maxed out, then that's when you start putting like the right gear combinations together. That's when you start learning the bosses properly and all that stuff. And then that's the proper game. I'm not quite like that with MMOs, but kind of similar, not too far away. I wouldn't go so far as to say the game hasn't started yet, but certainly like the bit that you're...
It's certainly not the end. The level cap, reaching the level cap is certainly not the end.
Oh, no, for sure. Like, and certainly not in this either, given that there's so much to do. And that's just a character level cap as well. Like, there's caps on, I presume there are, caps on the crafting and the woodworking and all that stuff. So I don't know, like, which level cap are you talking about? Like, I've capped out the cooking, but my character is still not max level. I don't, whatever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Depends how you want to play.
Yeah.
All right. So it's given that you're the one person in the world that hasn't played or isn't playing
and isn't queuing to play, by the
or isn't currently queuing to play it. Yeah. Q Worlds is what some people have been calling it. Like, that's a meme that's been going around.
I will say this for it, that having heard you talk about it, I'm more intrigued, I'm more inclined to play it than I was half an hour ago or however long ago before we started this conversation. So that's a thing. I think for me, that's kind of progress. I'm like, I might have a look at this. I want to go and be a fisherman.
At its core, it's always got it is still an MMO, and it is still all of those MMO things.
Yeah.
It's just within that space. It's
not revolutionary, but it does sound,
certainly not.
Sounds like it does things very well. The things it picks to do, it does well.
Yeah, and given the budget of the game, well, I don't know what the budget is, but given what the budget must be, and the noises that Amazon have been making, like there's new stuff coming as well.
Yeah,
like this is by no means, and there has to be, right? Like if you want something to survive in this sort of in the market situation for MMOs at the moment, it's got to be. It's like ESO, like Elder Scrolls was like, it was like, compared to what it's got in there now, that was just skeletal when that released. So yeah, I mean, this has got to
and
do
they will
the
come
same
in the
thing.
form, presumably. I mean, it will be. I'm sure it will be, free content updates, of course, but they will also come in the form primarily as, I guess, as expansions, paid expansions, because that's how else is Amazon going to, monetize it in an ongoing way. If you charge people a one-off fee, you need to charge them again at some point. Otherwise, they're just going to play for thousands of hours with no further.
Yeah, possibly. Input. I wouldn't be surprised to see a subscription model come in.
Right.
So a subscription model where you get everything that is ever going to be added to the game, and you might get some cosmetic stuff as well, or you can just play the free base game, which is what it is now potentially.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Amazon's. I mean, as a much wider concept, Amazon is all about kind of subscriptions.
Well, yeah, exactly.
General,
I've already got Amazon Prime, so hopefully that will just be part of.
Yeah, I set up a subscription the other day for like SodaStream refills or something, through Amazon. So it's like, it's all about the subscribe and save kind of language and model. I
take my SodaStreams to the canisters to Robert Dias, and they give you it's £10 off if you give them a canister.
Yeah.
All right, so other than SodaStream and New World,
that's what I've been playing recently.
Instead of New World and alongside SodaStream, what have you been playing?
Well, so one of the things I've been playing a lot throughout September, and I finished and kind of wrapped up on in September, was Neo: The World Ends With You, which I referenced a few weeks ago. I've already said about how time flies, so it could have been 3 months ago. But a few weeks ago, I feel like we talked about video game settings. And in that episode, I talked about Japan being a setting that intrigues me and makes me more inclined to look at a game that I may not have been interested in previously. Or if I hear it's in Japan, then I'm more inclined to sort of look further into it. So The World Ends With You is set in Japan, specifically in the Shibuya area of Tokyo, downtown Tokyo. And I've been playing a lot of, I've gone to the end of it, done the epilogue as well. And it has been, it was a game that I didn't expect to like as much as I did. I thought I'll play it and it will be things like the story will take a back seat. It will be more about the mechanical feeling of how are these things put together? How does the combat system work? But I actually found myself quite invested in the story. I think the characters are very well written. I think they all feel like distinct personalities, and beyond just like a cliched distinct personality, which I think it would be very easy to do because they are all kind of, for the most part at least, teenagers and very kind of, like it'd be easy to write stereotypical characters in that sense.
Yeah, so it is a JRPG. So does no one have amnesia?
Does anybody have amnesia? Somebody does develop amnesia at one point, and that becomes part of a mission structure that you have to go and fill in your memories. But certainly nobody starts the game with it. No, so there's no like you learning alongside the characters what's happened previously and why you are where you are. There is kind of one of those, and it has a name that I can't remember off the top of my head. Where you're learning a new setting, like you're transported into a new world effectively, and you're learning a new setting alongside the characters because there's this Reapers game that happens at they kind of get sucked into, the characters get drawn into. And there's a couple of little cute things they do with that because it's set in Tokyo, which is incredibly busy. There's a lot of pedestrians walking around, but because you're in this sort of semi-alternate reality, it's almost like a ghost world type thing, that it means that you can pass through all of the pedestrians that are in the real world without bumping into them, because that would be from a very logistical standpoint, that would be really annoying because of how many, like the crowds are there. And if you were having to navigate the crowds or you were bumping into people constantly, it would be annoying. So they've got this kind of cute contrivance that, you can see all the people, but they can't see you, and you can just pass right through them as if you were a ghost. And I won't go into spoilers, but there's things they do with that later on.
So what's different about this then? Because normally when we talk about JRPGs, you're either you're typically not interested in them / haven't played them.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a JRPG. And one of the most sort of JRPGs
of the JRPGs,
as well.
Yeah. It's the most J of the JRPGs. Well, I mean, again, so the setting does a lot of the work there, honestly. A lot of the work to get me invested, get me interested in the first place. So it's set in a very specific place in Japan, a place that I've been to. It evokes the feelings of Shibuya very well. And as I say about the characters as well, although the default is they have American voiceovers, I would urge anybody to put it into the Japanese voiceovers because I find it far more compelling, but it's also far less irritating when they're in combat and they're using the same kind of call outs and barks very regularly. When it's in Japanese, assuming you don't speak or understand Japanese, it's far less annoying because you just don't hear it. It's like sounds you hear, but you don't hear somebody saying take that or I'm going to get you or any of that sort of nonsense. So yeah, that's just as a little tip, is to put it into Japanese voiceovers. So yeah, the setting does a lot of the work as to why I'm interested in it. The characters are, I think, well written, and it's very it wears its heart on its sleeve. The characters have very well realized conversations that are like nobody is. It sounds a bit twee, but nobody's like made fun of. They're all like geeks or nerds to varying different degrees. They all have things that they're interested in individually, but that's kind of just accepted. They just talk about stuff without it being like, you're really into shopping, or you're really into, online games. Oh, you're such a nerd. And it just cuts through a lot of that cliche stuff of, this is the one that's like this. And everybody thinks that they are, antisocial and a shut in, and then they have their moment to shine. It doesn't do any of that. It just is like, well, let's brush past that and let's have the characters talk to each other. I guess in a, like, ironically somewhat, it's like they're actually very mature, more mature than perhaps a lot of people online might believe to be. Like they have actual wholesome conversations about stuff. So and I guess that maybe that's an expectation thing for me. I saw the characters, I saw the character models. I expected them to talk to each other in a certain way, and they didn't. I was like, okay, that's refreshing. That's. I'm not just going to be sat here hitting X to skip through all of this text because they're just having inane conversations. So there's that. That kind of kept me invested, or helped in the early hours. But yeah, two of the biggest things are the aesthetic and the soundtrack. The music is fantastic. Like, it's awesome. The number of different tracks they've got in there.
Is it original or is it like licensed music?
I don't know, to be honest. It sounds licensed to me. Nothing that I recognise, but it sounds licensed. But whether it is, I don't know. It certainly sounds like they're full length tracks for the most part. They are discrete, like 3-4 minute full length tracks. So it sounds like they have been created for an album or, you know, to stream. It doesn't sound like it's just been written specifically for this game. So yeah, the music's awesome, and that helps a lot. And even when you hear the same tracks, I mean, there's a lot of tracks, but even when you do hear them perhaps come up, because each time you go into combat, it will play a different track, and there's like a little mini thing of, you know, you don't get the same music every time, so that's its own thing. That's its own little bit of engagement of like, I really like this one. I haven't heard this one for a while. And the combat system, in tandem with kind of how it sounds during combat, the combat system is very well done. It has so playing on PlayStation, playing on a PlayStation controller, you have these pins, as in badges, pins, that you assign to each character. And certainly initially, each character can only do one thing. So each character will be mapped to a button. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be that different to having probably one person, just one big character, and triangle is this move, and square is this move, and circle is this move. But they map it to individual characters. And then some of them will be like tap attacks, and some of them will be charge attacks and hold attacks, like where you hold somebody in place. And it just adds this level of, well, it's like a dynamic system because you're encouraged to swap out pins periodically and try different combinations. And it takes a while to warm up, I would say, but it does get to a point where the combat is about like positioning as well. Initially, it's not like that at all, because you can move the characters around. Whichever character you used last, whoever's power, you can then move that person around with the stick and then switch to somebody else and do the same thing. And there will be times later on when the positioning is key. For the first probably, 15, 20 hours of the game, you don't need to worry about that at all. You can go into a fight. You can mash the buttons if you want to, and then as you start to learn the nuances of it, you can use this power in combination with somebody else's power, that this one plays off this one, or triggers something new, triggers a new effect.
Is it difficult?
No, not for the... No. I mean, I saw the game over screen, which happens really only in combat, a handful of times. And that was probably on a couple of particular boss fights where there was a spike. But in general... No, I don't think it is difficult. I would say, as much as the combat system works if you're willing to explore it, I can also see it becoming stale if you don't push yourself to explore it. Because if you find a set of pins that work for your team, I imagine it could be quite tempting just to stick with that and not change it up. Whereas I was like, you level up the pins. Sometimes they'll evolve into a different type of power, and then you can level them up further. And that's the cue that I was then taking once I'd done that, to then try a different pin. But I can imagine just finding a set of pins that works very well and then just doing it, ad infinitum. And I can imagine that would probably get boring if that's what you did, because you would just feel like combat was the same all the time. But the game doesn't really push you to do that. It doesn't, it's kind of up to you. It doesn't throw situations at you very often where you have to swap out your pins to try different powers, because there is nominally an elemental system of, rock, paper, scissors, but it's not ingrained enough, or it's not pushed enough that you have to go and find different pins to work in different situations, which I think is probably a shame. It's to its detriment, because I can imagine people then just not bothering because they're not being pushed to, and it does shine a bit brighter if you are exploring more of what it has to offer. Same as the clothes system, equipping people with different clothes gives them different abilities and different powers.
Yeah, it's just like real life.
Just like real life, exactly. So if I put on my studded leather collar, then that's going to give me a certain set of powers that I don't have.
You can ride a motorbike
if I'm just wearing my apron. So I've been really enjoying it. I'm now done with it. As I say, I went through. It does a cute thing with the epilogue, because it, again, no spoilers, but it kind of it leaves, you have the main story that has its own ups and downs, and some dark things happen and some great, happy things happen. But then it has an epilogue, which is like an alternate reality epilogue, which means it's able to leave you on sort of a high. It's able to leave all of the characters, all your favorites from the 60 hours of game that you've just played. It leaves them in a certain like sort of warm and fuzzy state that is detached from the main game. And I think that's a good thing for this kind of game, because I think it's kind of quite cutesy, and it just leaves you with that like warmer feeling rather than, oh, I'm really bummed that X happened to Y. It takes it outside of that. So yeah, it's a game that I didn't expect. When I first started playing it, I didn't think I was going to get through to the end of it necessarily. I didn't have that intention. I just wanted to see what it was like, because I hadn't played the original World Ends With You on, what was that, on DS about a million years ago.
How long is it? Because we've both spoken about long. I mean, New World is just infinite.
Infinite, yeah. It's about 55, 60 hours is what I put into it.
Okay.
To see a lot. I don't think I really did that much like after the credits. I didn't really go back into it to kind of keep grinding or exploring. So that was a single playthrough, but I was pretty thorough in doing all of the side quests, of which there aren't a tremendous amount, but I did all the side quests kind of on my way through the game. There's a light sort of time travel mechanic at some point that means you can go back to different, because it's split into days of the week, and you can go back to different days and try and like mop up any side quests or find anything that you missed. And I did that during the game rather than at the end. So that's a pretty kind of completionist's view, not in terms of getting all of the gear and 100%ing all of the collectibles, but certainly in terms of ticking off all the side quests. Yeah. So it's been thoroughly enjoyable. I would kind of, a bit to my own surprise, would recommend it.
Does this mean you're going to play JRPGs now?
Maybe. Not by default. There's not a lot of grinding involved, which for me is a plus, which I often sort of typically associate with JRPGs, but there isn't really much grinding unless you want to. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm aware of the time, so I will just say as sort of as a secondary, because another game I've been playing recently on Switch.
I suppose it is. Point out that we do play. I've played more than just New World this month.
For sure.
Of course, we played Diablo as in last week's episode.
Game, Deathloop, I've been playing a lot of as well.
Deathloop, so we could go on and on and on with, but we don't want a 5-hour episode. So
no, not today. But I will just mention Toem on Switch, which is a photography style puzzle exploration game, which I've enjoyed a lot as well. And I want to give that a shout out because I don't know how. I mean, it's on Switch, PC, Mac, and PS5, but I don't know sort of what the visibility of it is.
It's been reviewed.
How well it's being pushed.
It's been reviewed fairly well. I don't know how well it's how high its sales numbers are or anything like that.
Yeah,
but
I'd recommend
for a certain
it's
audience,
good. It's good fun. It's a very Sunday afternoon style of game. I would describe it as, and it's very charming and very lovely. And it's black and white, which is odd, as in unique, different. You see it, and
there aren't that many black and white video games.
No,
there are some.
West of Loathing was the last one I played.
Yeah,
but anyway, I won't go into
Game Boy
detail
game.
about that monochrome green screen. I won't go into detail about Toem because of the time, but I will say it is definitely worth a look. And it won't be for everybody for sure, but it's worth having a look at and seeking out and just seeing if you think it sounds like the kind of thing that you'd be interested in, walking around taking photos and solving people's problems. It's very quaint.
Yeah, in black and white. Sounds very
and black and white. Yeah,
very French.
Very art house.
Very Lumiere brothers for film historians. All right, so there you go. New World and Neo World Ends. Is it Neo World Ends With You or World Ends With You?
It's Neo, The World Ends With You.
Yeah, The World Ends With You and
Toem.
And Toem and New World.
Check that out.
So yes, that's all we've got time for. As Stace said, Do drop us a follow on Twitter. We are at Indie by Design, and our website is indiebydesign.net, where you'll find all the books that we have produced and written. Our latest book, 20 Double Fine Years, is out now. It has been out in the pre-order phase for a while, but it's now available to purchase. So you can click buy and it will arrive shortly after. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we will be back next week. Next week's episode, just going to sort of put it out there now as a sort of, if you want to play along.
This is new. Yep.
So Back for Blood is out soon, and that's what we'll be talking about next week. So if you want to play that before next Tuesday, which I believe you actually have to have early access to the game for, so maybe it gets released on Tuesday, but if you buy a certain edition, you'll get 4 days early access starting Thursday. So, if you want to play some of that before listening to us chat about it next week, then please do so. But otherwise, we will see you then, whether you've played it or not. And until then, have a good week, and we'll see you next time.